morning, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the last episode of our webinar series, Mastering OKRs, Three-Step Success Formula with Ben Lamorte. Folks, I'm Senthil, President and COO of Profit.co, and I'm thrilled to have you join us today. Right. So at Profit.co, we are passionate about empowering organizations to achieve strategic alignment and high performance through effective OKR implementation. Right. And Ben Lamorte is a globally recognized authority on OKRs. He has more coaching experience than anyone on the planet. Right. So before we dive in, I would like to quickly introduce Profit.co, your partner in strategy execution and performance excellence. Right. So Profit.co focuses on three pillars of performance excellence. Number one, strategy execution. Right? Aligning your organization around a shared vision with our OKR and balanced scorecard solutions, cascading goals, tracking progress, and making data-driven decisions. Pillar two is employee performance management and engagement. Unlock your team's full potential with our performance management and employee engagement solutions. Right? Fostering a culture of continuous growth and collaboration. Pillar three is project portfolio management. Deliver projects efficiently and effectively with our robust project management capabilities. Right? And we have now integrated with cutting-edge technology. Right? AI is now central to your entire Profit.co experience. Right? So you can do AI-powered OKR creation. Right? Leverage AI to streamline the creation and setting up of OKRs. You can do AI-powered automated progress summaries, right, at various levels. And you can even integrate AI to provide intelligent feedback and assessments. Right? By integrating AI with our platform, Profit.co not only simplifies performance management, but we also try to empower the organizations with data-driven insights and automation. Okay. And folks, while I do a quick introduction to Ben, I also wanted to tell you throughout the session, please get your questions out. Right? We're going to try to answer your as much questions as possible, because based on my previous experience, there were a lot of questions, and we wanted to make sure we're able to cover a lot of these ground. Right? And just to complete the introduction about Profit.co, today we are being in the leadership quadrant for the past 12 quarters, both in G2 as well as in Gartner, and we have been mentioned by IDC as well. Right? And Profit.co is mentioned not just in OKRs, but also in performance management, digital workplace, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Now, So far we have done 3 webinars in this series, right? And today we are going to do the final webinar, maintaining momentum throughout your OKR cycle. Right? So for a lot of people, this is the real challenge, right? You get started, but how to really maintain the momentum as we go along. Right? So let me now quickly introduce Ben. Right? Ben has pretty much been part of the OKR experience of this planet, right? Probably for the last 10 plus years. Right? He has probably more OKR coaching experience than anyone in the planet. Right? He coaches business leaders and startups, enterprises, and he has worked with some of the most illustrious customer names, right? So he founded OKRs.com in 2014, and he has worked with leading companies like eBay, Adobe, Capital One, Career Builder, quite a few of them. And he has clients pretty much in all continents, from Australia to Asia, Africa, Europe, and of course the US. He has also been a co-author of a couple of books. The first book, Objectives and Key Results, was one of the books which I had used, to update myself. And his most recent book, the OKRs Field Book, in 2022, is probably the only book for OKR coaches. Right? I absolutely enjoyed reading that. Would encourage you to go through that. Right? So with that, I'm going to probably hand it over to Ben. Right? Ben, over to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Senthil. And this is our 4th and final webinar. It promises to be the best webinar for any of you who have seen any of the first 3. They were also really good, and the questions are going to be great. First of all, I have to say, as far as AI goes, I'm a little bit worried that I'm going to be replaced by AI. And I think if you're not worried about that by now, you're not living on planet Earth. because of digital twins and things like this that are going on. I mean, who knows? I actually did a little chatbot session with myself, and I'm a pretty good OKR coach on chatbot. I was like, those are pretty good questions. So I encourage you after this, if you want some free OKR coaching, just use AI and see what happens if you chatbot, or if you can find an OKR coach chatbot and try to play around with it. So let's start with the definition of OKRs. And I really do want you to think of this as a verb. And you'll see this over and over every time I do a presentation, because I want to remind you, it's a critical thinking framework, which means it's a set of questions we ask, right? And we're going to be talking about the questions that we ask in the check-in process today. It's an ongoing discipline. Oh my goodness, this part right here of the definition is so important. It's not something that you just do once a quarter or once every 6 months or whatever. It's an ongoing discipline, meaning you're asking these questions all the time. And we're trying to get our employees to work together. What a concept, right? So often across teams, right? Not just in their little silos. And we're trying to focus our effort to make measurable contributions. Of course, the implied point is on our most important goals, but I took that part out. It's pretty implied. So with that, let's talk about the 3 phases of OKRs projects. We've already talked about phases 1 and 2 in prior webinars, so I'll skip that. But this approach has worked with hundreds of organizations. It's probably closer to 300 organizations now. And we're going to focus in on step 2 of the cycle. Just as a reminder, step 1 is where you define your OKRs, kick off your OKR cycle, typically a quarter, but it could be 4 or 6 months typically. Then you're going to be checking in and monitoring on that progress. And this is really the key. As Senthil said, this is really where you can lose momentum. So this is where we maintain momentum, okay, everybody, by doing step 2, checking in and monitoring. And then there's reflect and reset at the end of the cycle, which we've already covered step 1 and step 3 in prior webinars. This one here, I think it's kind of funny that we're covering this last, because maybe that was unconscious, but this is kind of an afterthought. But it's probably the most important step. I say that step 1 at the end of the day, build your foundation for your OKRs. So if you don't get your OKRs right, checking in on them will be a waste of time. But we're going to assume that you're getting your OKRs right. And so many of my clients do. They get their OKRs right, but then they fail here. I shouldn't say so many of my clients, but when I first started, that was a true statement, because I would help them with step 1. They would get all excited. And then I would help some of the teams with step 2, and they would be somewhat successful. But the other teams would just say, oh yeah, we'll do it on our own. And guess what? They didn't do it. So when we talk about step 2, checking in, I really want you to take this first quick tip with you today. Okay, so if you're writing your OKRs down, I'm looking at my calendar, April, yeah, probably a lot of you who are on a quarterly calendar, okay, Senthil, I see why we schedule it this way, is you're just about to publish your OKRs for, quote, Q2, if you're on a calendar year. My quick tip for you is schedule a mid-cycle check-in now. Like actually when you publish your OKRs, make sure you have a mid-cycle check-in scheduled, and we'll talk about what that looks like today. All right. Just to give you some context, we talk about mission and vision, and those are for a long, but the mission is all of time. The vision is, 5-year vision or 10-year vision. Strategic initiatives might be 1, 2, or 3 years out. OKRs typically form that 3 to 6 month time frame. But the actions, the tasks that drive your work, this is really where you get your work done. And so step 2, I put this little note in here, it's all about the action plans. This is all about the task. This is where you get your work done. So if you just do the OKRs and you just have a mission and a vision, these are just a bunch of executives having meetings, getting all excited about their business, but they're not doing anything. If you stop and think about it, you haven't executed anything. So John Doerr says, ideas are easy, execution is everything, or something like that. Well, execution really comes into play right here on the action plans and tasks where the rubber meets the road of getting your work done. So by now, the first pitfall of the OKR cycle step 2 check-in will be 0 OKRs review, right? We call it set it and forget it. That is the number 1 biggest pitfall. Of course, nobody on this webinar will make that mistake, okay? Let's hold ourselves accountable. But sometimes even worse is if you add a whole bunch of OKR-specific meetings and processes, where you might have 2 meetings a week dedicated to just talking about OKRs. If you add a bunch of new meetings, every now and then that might work, but for the most part, you're going to kill your OKR project because nobody wants more meetings, okay? The other big pitfall, and I don't know if you've been there, you can put it in the chat if you've been there and done this one, where there's a massive readout of literally dozens of key results. in a multi-hour meeting that makes you want to pull your hair out, right? Just going down a list of key results and let me give you an update on this one, an update on that one. And eventually you're just having brain fog. Then there's the lack of clarity about who's accountable for updating key results, right? I mean, this is the easiest pitfall to fix. Put a name next to every key result. And then there's the inconsistent updates, where basically everybody who updates progress on OKRs does it in their own way. You know, the marketing team gives you an update like this. The product team gives you an update like that, et cetera. And the CEO is sitting here going, can you guys just give me an update in a single format so I can follow what's going on and not need to learn new templates every time somebody talks to me? And then sometimes people just look back. It becomes almost defensive. I don't know if you've ever done a check-in like this where, you know, the key result person is speaking about their key result, the key result champion or owner. And they're saying, well, we did this, we did that, we did this, we did this. We're working on this. We're like 60% done with this. It's like, okay, I don't care. Is the key result on track, right? What is the confidence? So you'll see, I've done my best to map the solutions here. But what I want to talk about is integrating OKRs into your existing team meetings. So mostly, it doesn't always work, but mostly a team that sets OKRs also happens to meet every week or every 2 weeks or whatever. They have an existing cadence already, in which case, please integrate your OKRs into your existing team meetings. Now, in some cases, you'll actually create an OKR set that almost creates a new team. Well, then you have to create a cadence. So it's not quite as simple as that, but I want you to think about how to integrate OKRs into your existing team meetings. And this definitely works for company-wide meetings, right? At your annual meeting or your quarterly meeting for your company. That's when you would bring in your OKRs. The big win, big learn, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but this is how we avoid reading out all of the key results. And I think I'll just say, using a standard template with, I made this bold italics because I really want you to talk about confidence. Are we on track to achieve the key result? That's even more important, it turns out, than how much work have I done for this key result. This is the I hate to tell you but speech, right? Leadership often doesn't care how much work you've been doing on this. If anything, if you've been doing a lot of work, they worry how much it's costing them for your team to do all this work. What they want to know is, and start with this, is are we on track to hit the key results? Start with that and then get into the work, right? So this is why I put this in bold italics.
Hey,
Okay, so
Ben?
every key result has a key result champion, and we're going to use the example of SEMA. SEMA is going to be our key result champion in this example. So SEMA is a person who has her name next to the key result. Now, typically, a key result has 1 or 2 champions. Those, we don't really recommend having 3 because you get to that diffusion of responsibility. But sometimes it's nice to have 2. So again, a little bit more of an art than a science on whether to have 1 or 2. And we covered that in an earlier webinar. So I'll just move forward to, what does the key result champion do? And by the way, I started offering key result champion training, and I found it was unbelievably effective. It's only a 30-minute training. It's not, you know, a massive workshop or anything, but you just need to tell them, hey, you're the key result champion. Here's what you need to do. Find a team of people. It's typically 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 people, small number of people. And it's not necessarily all the people based on your reporting structure. So it might be people from different teams in the org chart. And these are the people that are going to get stuff done. And I'm going to show you an example of that. Agree with your team whether you're meeting weekly or bi-weekly. That's the default, to meet weekly or bi-weekly. But sometimes you might want to just meet ad hoc. I don't really care. But whatever makes sense. The point is, have an agreement about that. The key result champion needs to manage the team that's going to drive that key result and update that action plan. And then you're going to update progress via the standard updates, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. Honestly, I don't really care too much, but I want you to find the cadence that works for you. What we find is that weekly, for many organizations, is just too frequent. It becomes like, hey, look, we just talked about this, there's no update. But some organizations love the weekly updates. So bi-weekly is kind of, if you were putting me in a corner, this is what I would recommend, bi-weekly, as a general rule of thumb. Because that way, if you miss a meeting, it becomes monthly. If you do monthly, do that at your own risk, is what I would say, okay? Now, take a look at this. So here's our key result that we're going to zoom in on. Notice that we have a key result, which is, as you know, a measurable indicator of progress toward an objective. And it's double the quality of leads. So that's a quality key result, which, by the way, these are harder to write than quantity key results, right? Like just get more leads, increase leads from 100 to 200, great. But this is about doubling the quality of leads. And now we have the magic words, as measured by. an increase in leads that convert to opportunity within 6 weeks of creation from 20 to 40% Q4 into H1. They actually have different timeframes here, but that's okay, because here we were measuring it in Q4, and here we're measuring it over the entire first half of the year. Wow, right? That's a key result, because we're really moving the needle. We're really improving lead quality. Great. But if you just write that key result and say, yeah, that sounds cool, now let's track that and see what we can do, it's not going to happen. You have to have an action plan. And this is where the key result champion, right, SEMA, has a name next to each action item, right? Like, we meet with these people who can get stuff done in the marketing group or whoever else it has to be. And we're going to get a breakdown of lead percentage for each type of lead, right? People have been talking about inbound leads are really a problem now because, inbound isn't moving. Oh, well, let's actually start measuring that. Let's measure the lead quality across these various types of leads. This is like an obvious first step, and Mike is going to take care of that. Kelly is going to plot the lead score, whatever in the world that is. This is based on a real client, but they had some way of measuring the quality of a lead using some automated tools versus opportunity creation, because who knows if that's even correlated. Everybody keeps on saying the lead score needs to be over 70. The lead score needs to be over 70. What it does? Let's actually plot that and see if that's really true. And then Kim is going to audit lead quality by sales reps by interviewing the top 3 sales reps to get tips. In other words, we're not going to just go to the data and plot things. We're going to actually talk to some of the sales reps. The sales reps know a good lead when they see one. So let's get some potential ideas. Like, what is their experience? Oh, the leads from fill in the blank, they're the good ones. Or the leads that have, an actual work email address instead of @gmail.com or whatever. Oh, those are the good ones. We don't even like to call these personal emails anymore or whatever. Okay. And then Yvonne is going to do more of like a qualitative study. Just follow the leads, see what happens from the initial qualification call, what's going on, just sort of audit the process of what's happening with these leads to see if they can get created to an opportunity. Because, by the way, underneath this one is the marketing team thinks maybe the sales team is dropping the ball. So they're going to kind of audit the sales reps and sort of pick 10 leads to go through and see how the sales team's doing it. So that's what's going on. Now, the 2 types of check-ins to monitor that progress, we have our single team and our multi-team, okay? The multi-team was the one I mentioned earlier, that you really want to start it at one time, one mid-cycle check-in, right? That's what it says when. Once in the middle of the cycle, schedule that one in advance. I'll get to that in a second. The single team is basically your team. So all the key result champions, in the case of SEMA will be there. And all the other kind of marketing people that are working on that OKR will be there. And just the marketing team in this case will be at this one. So this would be integrated into the marketing team meeting. And here we're going to go over every key result. We're going to take a minute or two and just talk about each key result. This keeps it center of our focus. And typically a team will have somewhere between 8 and 12 key results. Again, that's not always true. And I've talked about this before, but less is more. So if you only have 4 or 5 key results, that's actually generally better than having, 10 or 12 key results. But once you get to 12, I really want to, boom, stop you. It's at some point, having more key results beyond 12 seems to be a problem for teams. And if you run the math, right, if you did 2 minutes on every key result and you had 12 key results, that would be 24 minutes just to go over your key results. Maybe you have an hour meeting. So you don't have much more time for your regular items on your discussion. Now, again, you'll have a cadence, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. Okay, quick tip. Some teams meet weekly, but what they do is they have a formal OKR check-in bi-weekly, right? So they'll have their team meeting. We won't need to talk about key results unless there's an exceptional reason why. And then the next meeting will start with OKRs. So they always start their bi-weekly one, right? Every other weekly meeting starts with OKRs. And they know that. This is our OKR meeting. This is our regular team meeting. This is our OKR meeting. This is our regular team meeting. That can work really well also. The point is, have lots of these single team check-ins and go over all key results. Whereas with multiple teams, now just stop and think about this. With multiple teams, and I've had a client where we had like 8 teams, each with, let's say, 8 key results. Well, maybe it was 5. It really wasn't. I try to get them to have less. So I'm proud to say they were about 5. But even then, 40 key results. Can you imagine a meeting where we're going to go through and everybody's going to talk about 40 key results for a minute or two? You're just going to be left like, what just happened? So this is where you only have each team present 2 key results. They highlight it, right? Like, here's a big win. Everybody claps. And here's a big learn. Here's an area where we need to make more progress or something didn't go according to plan. And we show that it's okay not to achieve every key result, and we model that. You only do this one once in the middle of the cycle, and sometimes you do it at the end, okay, to capture learnings from it. So here is the template that I would have SEMA use, right? All of the key result champions will use something like this. They'll have the key result, and then they'll say, here's the progress, right? Here's our current value. Now we're at 25%, right? So they tell the story. Here we are, confidence score, 60% confident that we'll achieve the key result. So we're improving. Here are the blockers. Notice this, right? A lot of the paid affiliate leads are from outside the USA and converting at just 10%. Well, that's not good. So they want to think about how and if we can move this to just paying for the US. So you get the idea. Here are the next tasks coming up. And something like this is about right. Notice the font size. There's not a ton of data. It's not super detailed. You want it to be relatively like that. So in closing, let's just summarize the key tips for making step 2 a working program for you. And then we're going to actually see what this looks like in a software tool, of course, Profit, because Profit's doing the webinar. And we'll see what SEMA's check-in process will look like for this key result. So for this, first of all, it's obvious, right? Remember SEMA, have a key result name next to every key result. I believe in Profit, you're going to have to put a name in next to the key result. It's going to force you to do that because that's a best practice. You can't just write key results and say, isn't that great? There's no accountability. And then the key result champions need to have a small team. And you as the OKR project champion, you can help your KR champions, right? Those individuals like SEMA to create that small team with an action plan. Say SEMA, who are the key people that need to get the work done? Let's bring them in together. We'll do a brainstorm of what are the action items. At the end of this meeting, we'll have a list of key action items that need to get done in the short term, like the next couple of weeks. 1 week to a month, typically, like really short-term projects that we can check in on progress. And we'll put a name next to each one of those. Have that mid-cycle check-in scheduled way in advance. I think I told you that already. Design and ensure the use of that standard check-in template. Make sure that there's a standard check-in template. You can use the 2x2 that I showed you, or if you use Profit or like a software solution, it will have a standard check-in template built into it, and you'll do that at an agreed-upon cadence. And again, I want to emphasize this, right? For the mid-cycle check-in with multiple teams, which I highly recommend you do this, there's a do not, right? The do not is read out every KR. You're going to waste your time. You're going to get low energy. Just don't even do it. The do is present just 2 key results per team. Have each team just present a big win where everybody can clap, and then a big learn where, hey, this isn't working out. And that actually forces the team to kind of normalize that it's okay not to achieve all your key results, because it's really not expected that you achieve all your key results. Okay, so at this point, this is my signal to say, let's actually go in and see how the check-in might work interactively in Profit. So over to you, Bala.
Thank you, Ben. Hey, everyone. Good morning and good evening. Now, when it comes to, let's say, making a check-in, I'll just consider the same example that Ben here gave us an overview. Now, considering this example here, that is double the quality of leads as measured by an increase in leads. Now, as an end user, when you would want to get an overview, you can directly come in, click on the key result here, and get an understanding in terms of how exactly your progress has been going so far. So here, the dotted lines in gray would be your planned progress versus the one in blue would be your actual progress which you have made so far. And the system further would give you an overview in terms of the owner, of course, SEMA, the period, the type of measurement which we have, and each and every latest comment or check-in which you have made over time. Now, one of the few other action items which we also had was very specific in terms of granularizing your key result into set of activities or tasks. Now here, as an example, if you can see, get breakdown of lead quality percentage for each type of lead. Now here you can see this particular task that way has been owned by Mike. Now what Mike can further do is, since this particular task that way has been assigned to him, at any point of time, he can come in, transition his task further on to next set of stage, whether stating the task that way has been scheduled or it is more of a work in progress. And as and when Mike here comes in and completes his task, he can just mark it as completed, and the system that way would accordingly take it to the next set of stage. And of course, at any point of time, SEMA that way can further come in and granularize her key result in terms of day-to-day tasks by directly coming in, clicking on the create task icon, go ahead, assign it to different set of stakeholders or individual, and accordingly, if required, set across due dates or due time for this particular task. Now, further, coming into the main agenda, that is a check-in, what Seema can do is, for this specific key result which we have here, she can directly come in, click on the target icon, and drag and drop it on the intended value. Now, as Ben here mentioned, we would have one of the fields here which would very specifically focus on value. So based on my progress, let's say 39 or 37, based on where I stand, the system would accordingly give me an overview in terms of the status as well. And further, as part of better engagement, what I can also do is come in, tag different set of stakeholders. So let's say, as an example, Mike here has made an attainment or completed one of his tasks. Now here, since I've tagged Mike here, what I can also do is further add additional comment either manually or in any of my native languages or so. I can also record my audio or video with just a click of a button and say, hi, Mike, great to see the progress which you have made so far. How about we have a one-on-one and further plan more in terms of the next steps which we have. And accordingly, the system that way would further convert the audio statement which I've given into a textual format. And team, once the system goes ahead and processes this particular statement, I can further take the assistance of AI to give me more elaboration based on my day-to-day activity, or I can also insert it as it is, and the system would accordingly take the input of my check-in. And once I go ahead and click on update here, the system, of course, with the AI further giving you another round of suggestion whether to state this is where you currently are and how exactly your progress that way has been, would give you a quick statement in terms of where you stand. And if required, in the meantime, you can also come in and view each and every history in terms of how exactly the check-in that way has been made so far, what the progresses have been, and accordingly make your update.
Yeah, and Bala, one important thing I saw is the status drop-down menu for that key result. See, it's really important, guys. I think Bala said it. Like, the system can automatically recommend what the status is, but you as the key result champion, so Seema can say, well, okay, even though we're at 39% and, it looks like everything's on track, maybe you want to say, or let's say we're at 25%. Yeah, exactly. But we might want to say, actually, we are on track. So you can overwrite that and say, I feel like we're on track. We're confident that we can achieve it. This is a super important point because maybe Seema found out that, yeah, we moved from 20 to 25%. Doesn't seem like that much of an improvement, but it's still a good improvement. But she now, through her next steps, she's like, oh my gosh, if we execute on these things, we should easily get to 40%. So I feel very confident. And so this is a really important point that you as the key result champion get to put in how you feel about your confidence. The reason why I emphasize that is a full confession. I won't name it, but I used to work for an OKR software tool and it would automatically do that, but you couldn't override it. It was just like, that's what it is. And this was driving people crazy because in so many cases, especially if you're in sales, you're not on track and you do all your sales in the last, 2 weeks of the OKR cycle or quarter. And so the system keeps telling you, you're not on track, you're not on track. And it just makes you go crazy. You want to say, yes, I am on track. I am on track. So you have that flexibility as well. And that's a really important feature.
All right. And of course, team, there's more depth in terms of the application, different features, functionalities, more for you all to review. But at any point of time, we're happy to give you a one-on-one demo in terms of how the overall cycle that way would look like.
Great.
Sure.
Okay, so now we get to go to the best part. I would say back by popular demand, the best part of the webinar, which is always the Q&A. I think I've told you before, these webinars, we leave a lot of time for questions. In fact, we've left quite a bit of time for questions because this tends to be the most engaging and interactive part of the webinar. So let's do it. What do we got? Any good questions here, Senthil?
Sure, yes. So folks, what we showed you in the demo was probably scratching the surface, maybe 5% of profit.co, right? But we'd be happy to do a more detailed demo for anybody who is interested in looking at this. So let's start looking at the questions, right? Now, there are a bunch of questions in the Q&A panel, and there are also questions coming up in the chat. right? So let's first look at the Q&A panel, right? And so here's the first question. It gets to the crux of the problem. In one of my early OKR rollouts, we had beautifully written objectives, but by week 5, no one was updating progress. Have you faced a situation where you launched OKRs with excitement only to see them completely go silent mid-cycle?
Yes, the answer is yes. In fact, okay, look, I've been doing this for about 12 years now. And this is where I have to say, this is kind of embarrassing, but probably for the first like 5 years, it's a long period of when I started doing OKRs coaching. So I mean, this is me admitting the truth. I would have that excitement, especially after the training and developing OKRs. You know, every team is setting OKRs. We would do it like you said. I like the way you said it. They were beautiful. I mean, we had measurable key results. Everybody was really excited, and there's a little bit of an initial enthusiasm which might carry over for that first month or so, but then you lose it. You lose that momentum, and this is really the whole point of today's webinar. What I found is that as the OKR champion, like for me, I'm the external coach, right, helping my client. But you can be the internal coach helping your organization. The big hack here, the simplest thing you can do is set up that mid-cycle check-in so it's on everybody's calendar. And so 6 weeks out, right? Yeah, I love the question because you say by week 5, no one was updated. This is exactly what we find. So what you do is you set up that mid-cycle check-in, again, assuming it's a quarter. So like week 6 or 7, something like that. You put that out into the middle of the cycle. It's on everybody's calendar. Everybody who's a key result champion, right? By definition, is invited to this meeting. And then what happens is, and by the way, record this mid-cycle check-in, have each team do the 2 key result presentation, right? The big win and the big learn. That there's sort of a message. When you see that meeting on your calendar, the OKR teams are saying, oh, well, we better keep on track of our key results because we're going to have to share kind of what are we learning and where are we winning in our key results. So it makes it stay front of mind. That little thing right there seems to be a big driver in ensuring that the excitement stays on.
Sure, thanks, Ben. And Ben, I think the second question is also pretty interesting, and I know you had covered this in your session, right? I once led a check-in session where we had over 20 KRs to be reviewed in 45 minutes, and I could literally feel the energy drain from the room, right? So have you seen any check-in that felt more like a status report marathon than a meaningful
marathon
session?
Yes. Okay. Absolutely. I've seen this happen. This is one of the major pitfalls. In fact, the first 2 questions, you're really tackling 2 of the most common pitfalls. And so again, the solution here, there's 2 questions, right? Maybe this is just a single team that has 20 key results, in which case, I hate to say it, but maybe they should have less key results. Because what you'll find is that in a single team meeting, if we have 20 key results, and by the way, that has happened, it's very possible, because think about it, you could have 5 objectives with 4 key results each or something like that. And generally, I say 5 objective is the absolute cutoff. Do never have more than that per team. Think about it. We have 5 fingers on our hands, right? Don't have the 6. I think ultimately, though, 20 key results is probably too many for a team. And so that would be my first thing to say. The other solution would be, if you do have a team with 20 KRs, right? What you want to do here is say, at our review, what we're going to do is limit it to 1 minute per KR. It's going to be a super, super rapid, boom, this is where it's at. This is blah, 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 blah. You cannot, you have to have a timekeeper who just says, nope, we don't have time to go over this. Because if you did have a team with 20 key results, like I said, you do want to review all key results at the team meeting. And so how do you do it? You're going to have to just go bang, 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 right down the list really, really quickly, and just with the team. Now, if on the other hand, this question is 20 key results, and there's, let's say, 3 different teams coming together to share those key results, you cannot go bang, bang, bang all the way down through the list, because when my team isn't talking, I'm sitting here going, why are they telling me about every one of their key results? This is too many details. In which case, now I'm back to my point. If this is more of a mid-cycle check-in with multiple teams, or what I call a multi-team check-in, that's where you just boil this down to like 6 key results, right? If we have 3 teams, because team 1 does a big win and big learn, team 2 does a big win and big learn, team 3 does a big win and big learn. And I guarantee you, when you do that, it's more interesting. Because even if you go 3 or 4 or even 5 minutes per key result, if you're only going to cover 6 key results, the meeting will go faster. But also, it's that every team only gets 2 key results. So you can't really get super bored And it's a little bit of a deeper dive into the story of the key result. And I think the story and the takeaways, like the lessons learned, not just here are the numbers, but like, let me tell you what we learned from this in the big learn, can be very powerful.
Great. Thanks, Ben. There are a couple of questions in chat, which I think we can quickly answer. So first, to Saber, I have created my OKRs, which is approved. Is there a way you can have an one-on-one with Profit.co to help you transition to the software? Absolutely, yes. Right. You can just schedule a session with us in our website, or I'll have our team reach out to you as well. Right, that was an easy one. And now a question from Robert. So Robert's question is that, he's running a consulting firm and he has mostly independent contractors, right? And he's the only employee. Can he use OKRs, right? Ben, I think, we have seen a lot of cases where people work with individual contractors as well, right? I mean, they can be part of the OKR program as well, nothing preventing them. What do you think?
Yes, I've used OKR. So I'm very similar to you in that I am, quote, just me. I mean, look, I have a couple people that I do 1099s with, and I have, a finance person, an administrative assistant, whatever, but none of them are actually employees. And if at the end of the day, I'm probably interacting with maybe 5 to 10 people on my team overall. So I think I'm in a fairly similar situation as you. And what I will say is that I can do OKRs and I can benefit. And it's interesting because I don't need that many OKRs. So this is the good news. The good news is it's just me. So I don't make my contractors have OKRs and things like that. It's going to be too down in the weeds. But I might create OKRs around what is that one area. This is my key point for you. Okay. Have one area where you want to focus on improvement, because you don't need to have a set of the balanced scorecard thing where, you have your objective here and your objective there, 4 objectives or 4 perspectives. It's too much. But if you want to, for example, let's see, what was one of my OKRs? I think I had an OKR around more consistent, actually I didn't, but more consistent pipeline. That would be my new OKR now, because the economy is tanking and my pipeline is, I think most of us probably feel a little decline in our pipeline, unless we're in some business which somehow benefits from a recession. So for me, that would be my objective now. And what I do is I say, here's the objective, here's why it's important, and here are the measurable key results. And I would share that with my team, not necessarily everybody on my team, but people who can be involved in it in some way, just so they know what the focus is. And then that keeps me accountable. So I absolutely think you can have OKRs if you're, quote, a team of 1 with independent contractors. However, please limit yourself to just 1 OKR and probably be flexible with your cycle time, right? So does a quarter really make sense? You might need an OKR just for 1 month, or you might need an OKR for 6 months. So if it's just you setting OKRs for yourself within your team of 1, so to speak, technically, you have complete freedom and you can use the OKRs framework however you see fit. The final point I'll make is, when I wrote a book, I had a big project, right, to write my OKRs book in 2022. I actually wrote an OKR around the book. How will I know the book is a success? Because if it's just do something, write the book, you can just make that be a just do it task, but it's not an OKR. But if it's launch my OKRs book and make it a success, then I can start to have key results. Well, how will I know it's a success? And then that really helps me think about ultimately how to write the book. So if you have a big project that you're working on, that's also where you'll find an OKR can be very useful.
Great. And now we're going back to the Q&A panel, and we're going to look at some questions from the bottom. And so there's a question from Devraj, right? How do we get buy-in from the KR owners? Do we go full blast boiling the entire ocean, or do we pilot and create success stories for horizontal implementations?
Well, okay, the key result owners, that's the person like SEMA, right? That's when you put your name next to the key result. And those people should absolutely have buy-in. In fact, those people, what's really important is that they're involved with the finalization of the key result, right? You don't finalize the key results and then say, okay, SEMA, you do this one. That's not going to work. So you want to bring in those key result owner type people into the discussion as you're drafting and thinking about the OKRs. And then you'll sort of sense well, okay, SEMA, you seem to be pretty engaged with this key result. You have a lot of ideas about how to do this. How do you feel about being the key result owner? Oh, of course I'll do it. So it should be more of an opt-in as opposed to an assignment, right? People say, I was voluntold, right? Which is, hey, SEMA, don't you want to do this? It's yeah, So pay attention to that body language or tone of voice, because there really should be energy from the key result owner, at least in the beginning. of the OKR cycle. I can't guarantee you're going to be able to maintain that buy-in, because sometimes these key results are frustrating. Okay, I had a key result. I'll give you another tip. So you're going to try to avoid key results like this. Okay, and here was the key result: achieve an 80% survey satisfaction on customer satisfaction, or whatever it was. Oh no, it was internal employee satisfaction. But here was the problem: the survey for this key result was going to go out in like 6 months. So basically, you're telling me that I'm trying to improve the employee satisfaction metric, and I won't be able to measure that for 6 months. So what's going to happen is, every month that goes by, I'm going to keep saying I don't really have an update, because I'm waiting to get the update, which is going to happen. And it's frustrating because I can't see the needle move. I don't feel like I'm making progress. So be careful about key results that don't have the potential for consistent progress. Going back to SEMA in that example, where we say double the quality of leads, Baller showed us might go to 39%. Wow, we're totally on track. But it could also come down to 35%. But the point is, we can measure that like every week. So we can keep seeing where we're at. And then that gives me, as a key result owner, more engagement, right? Well, as long as it's moving up. If it starts to go down too much, I might get really angry. So there isn't a really simple answer here. But when you say, do we go full blast, boiling the entire ocean, or do we pilot and create success stories for horizontal implementation? I really like this, because I think underneath your question is the issue, right? And maybe this is the elephant in the room, right, Senthil, which is a lot of times the key result does require work, effort from other teams. So you might be the key result champion, SEMA, and you might say, okay, well, for Mary and Mike, they're in my team, and absolutely they'll work with me on this, and they're going to come and make action items. It's all good. But then I have this other team, IT. I always like to blame IT. So let's say IT. And we need IT to do X and Y. And we want to get some time with them and make sure and they're going to say, well, you need to fill out this form. You got to make an IT request. And they're like, you know what, forget it. We don't have time for this. This is not going to be successful for me. So what I found here is, if a key result owner is working on a key result and they need help from another team, the culture of the organization should be, hey, wait a minute, this is a key result. Without your help, we're not sure we can achieve it. And that needs to send the signal that, oh, this gets prioritized. Now, where I'm going with this is, in fact, if your company is not using OKRs across the company, it's just like 1 or 2 teams are using OKRs. This is the big problem, because the other teams that aren't using key results are going to be like, I don't care if you're doing your key result thing. That's not what we do. And I have my boss, and I'm working in my IT group, and I can't work with that. Talk to somebody else, or fill out this form, and then we'll see if we can put it on the queue or whatever. So try to have OKRs across your whole organization if possible. And I don't know, there's probably a lot more to it, but I think the main takeaway here is the key result owner really should be engaged in defining the key result from the start.
Sure. Thanks, Ben. That's pretty insightful. And a couple of questions again in the bottom. I know there's one from Sherry Warner. Do you have any recommendations on how to prevent teams from focusing on tasks or milestones as KRs, and change the mindset to focus on the measurable outcomes?
Yes. So you're such a good question here, Sherry, because what happens is, when you try to write OKRs, people will say our objective is, double the quality of leads or whatever. And so then when they try to write the key results, they're going to say, launch 3 blogs, publish the white paper, hire a new person, right? They're going to give you a list of things that they just want to do in order to achieve the objective. And by the way, I'll just come out and say it. I'm not going to name the exact author of this book, but it's probably, well, it is the most popular book on OKRs. But this book, unfortunately, misleads people, because it tries to define key results on what are we going to do in order to achieve the objective. And actually, that's exactly the wrong question to ask, because you're right here, Sherry, that the key result is, no, how will we know we've achieved the objective? Based on as measured by these measurable outcomes. You don't say as measured by we post 3 blogs. What if we post 3 blogs, but nothing happens, right? It's the old, if a tree falls down in the forest and no one's there, did it fall? Nobody heard it. I don't know. So you got to think about impactful key results. Probably not the best analogy, but you get the idea, I hope. So what I want you to do is make it okay. When people say we're going to write 3 blogs, we're going to publish the white paper, say, okay, great. Yeah, let's do that. But then ask the OKRs coaching questions. And this is like what the AI chat GPT robot would do if you try to get the Ben Lamorte OKRs coach. But these questions are actually very simple. So you can kind of see why the chatbot is good at this. Oh, my job security is going down as I speak. But it's basically, Sherry, what you would do is ask them, suppose we wrote 3 blogs. How would we know that's good? What is the real intended outcome? Have them start to ask those questions, or you ask them those questions. Because when people are, quote, in the weeds, they're just doing the work, it's very hard for them to step out and say, wait a minute, what is the real outcome we want? So you as the internal coach, or you could be an external coach like me if you're coaching your client, ask this question. And then they usually say, wow, I never really thought about that. I just need to publish 3 blogs. Well, okay, let's think about that. And then ultimately they say, oh, well, the blogs are designed to improve lead quality. All right, great. But how will we know if a blog improves lead quality? Oh, well, it's not just about did they click on something, it's did they click to sign up for the demo? Like, let's take Profit, right? Did Profit write a blog that allowed somebody that said, hey, I want to sign up for the demo? Oh, wow, that's pretty good. But we're going to only tell you it's a quality lead if they've already drafted their OKRs and they're saying, we want to put our OKRs into Profit. Okay, now that's a really quality lead. So then you're writing a blog that's trying to result in the outcome of increase the number of demos with prospects that have already written down OKRs from whatever to whatever. And then once you have that outcome, and you saw this in the Profit solution too, you have your key result, then you have your tasks. So you're still going to have those milestones and tasks. Don't just throw those out. But then underneath that, you might be like, publish 3 blogs and say, wow, that's a great task. We should totally do that. But now what's great about this is we know that the publishing 3 tasks, now we know why we're doing that. We're trying to get more of these demos. That's going to inform how we publish the blogs. That's going to inform the landing page we design, the call to action, et cetera. The content of the blog is going to be informed. And so you really have to take this one key result at a time. Okay, Sherry, there's no magic button that you can push and change to an outcome mindset. But by working on this one key result at a time and asking these questions, and the magic question is, what is the intended outcome of the task? Then you're going to be set. I will give you one other magic question, which I learned from my client, Indeed. I had this engineering team that was really good over there. And they said, how could we move that further down the value chain, right? Like if we publish 3 blogs, that sounds like a good thing to do, but how would we move that further down the value chain? Like, what is the real value we're trying to create? And then they would say, I don't know, I guess that would be like, so we could drive more blog subscribers. Okay, but if we get more blog subscribers, how can we drive that further down the value chain? The blog subscribers, if I'm the CEO, they also say this, the so what test. I have a bunch of blog subscribers, so what? What would happen then, right? So you keep on driving them down that value chain. And eventually, of course, if you were to go to the very end of it, you'd probably end with improve revenue or reduce cost or something like that. But you don't have to go all the way there, but move further to the value chain so that it becomes easier to see how the outcome ultimately drives us toward revenue increase or cost reduction.
Awesome. We have another question from Devraj, which I think is pretty commonly heard from a lot of people. I don't have time, right? So the last question, he's saying, they feel that updating the data on weekly basis and doing reviews is an extra burden while doing their day job.
Yes, this is exactly what I found. Okay, Devraj, I found this to be true. And so this isn't necessarily true for everybody. Okay, some people can do weekly and they're fine with it. But what I found actually is that most people cannot. Most people find it onerous, right? Or burdensome, same word, to update these darn things every week. They're like, we just did this. Why am I updating my key results every week? So especially like in my example of the survey results, which we're not even going to have an update for 6 months. So what am I supposed to do every week? Give an update? No, I mean, it makes me very mad actually that I can't put it in an update. So that's why I generally recommend bi-weekly as a default. And so if you find that the weekly basis is too much, I would immediately move to bi-weekly for that group, for your company, and see if that feels like too much. If that feels like too much, I would consider moving to monthly, or what I would do is say 1 mid-cycle formal check-in, and then other check-ins are ad hoc. Meaning, by the way, I had a client that had this problem. It was a big bank, and they were telling me that our big problem is the people are burning out on these weekly check-ins. It's just too much. They had OKRs everywhere, and everybody's doing these check-ins or updating all these things. It's taking them 20 minutes a week, but 20 minutes a week times 1,000 key results. It was 20,000 minutes of updating. And then, why am I doing this? That's how they felt. So I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to throw it out. no more weekly updates. We're going to have one mid-cycle check-in, and that's it. Now, if people want to have more updates, fine, but it's optional. But we're not going to require it. We're only going to require one in the mid-cycle. That little tweak that I made, first of all, the team that I was talking to, they said, oh, you can do that? I'll never forget that. I said, yes, you can do that. And what I said was, let's go to the extreme of just one check-in, because if you don't even have one check-in, you're going to set it and forget it. And you're basically, your OKRs project is doomed and you're going to fail. So let's just do the minimal, one check-in in the middle of the cycle, and that's it. And the funny thing is, I talked to them like a year later, and get this, that's exactly what they're doing still. They decided that having the one mid-cycle check-in was all they needed. It's a formal check-in. Every key result's going to be covered by your team, and then they're going to do a multi-team check-in on the big win, big learn. So I guess there's technically two check-ins there, a single team and then a multi-team. But that's it. Now, if they wanted to integrate OKRs into existing meetings, or if they want to update it, they can. But guess what? Almost nobody did. Almost nobody went back and did weekly updates. Almost nobody went back and did bi-weekly updates. In fact, nobody did the weekly one. And I think there were a couple teams that did bi-weekly. But the point is, okay, Dave Raj, pay attention to that, because your OKR system will break if you don't listen to people who are feeling that they have that extra burden.
Yeah, and maybe a couple of more questions. There are a few interesting questions. I mean, they have not mentioned their names, right? So one of the questions is, what role do individual contributors play in check-ins, especially when they are not KR champions?
Yeah, the good news for individual contributors is that you don't play a role in check-ins if you're not a KR champion, right? The KR champions are the ones who talk in the meeting. The individual contributors might play a role, obviously, between the check-ins, right? Because they're going to be the ones that get the work done and so forth. And they're going to speak to the key result champion and notify them of something to help them think about what the blockers might be, to inform their confidence, right? So if you're a key result champion and one of your individual contributors you might say, like in the example of Seema might say, well, we're only at 25%, but we're on track. I'm really confident we can get to 40%. Well, you might be an individual contributor and you might say, what? Seema, don't tell them that we're on track. Here, do you understand? Maybe we'll be able to get it to 40% like in 6 months, but we're not going to be able to get it to 40% this quarter. So you're totally blowing your optimism out of proportion. And so your job as an individual contributor is to sanity check the key result champion, because usually the individual contributor, I shouldn't say usually, but in many cases, individual contributors are a little bit more having their finger on the pulse of what's really going on with that key result than the key result champion. And so your job is to keep the key result champion on track. The final point I'll make there is sometimes an individual contributor wants to step up as a co-champion, in which case, then we have two names for the key result. And Seema might start talking, but because you are an individual contributor who wants to get a little bit more exposure to updating that and maybe have more of a role in the check-in. Most individual contributors are fine not having any role in the check-in. But if you really want to get more involved, you're going to tell Seema, I want to put my name on that key result too. And I'm going to be a spokesperson also. So when you talk, I'm going to put in my 2 cents. And Seema will be like, great, let's get more energy in here. And that works really well when you're an individual contributor, let's say from another team. So if Seema's marketing, but you're the IT individual contributor, maybe then it's good, because then you're showing that we have alignment, okay, with our key result across teams.
Great, thanks, Ben. One more pretty interesting question. You mentioned that 2 key results owners are better than 1. We prefer having 1 and a deputy, right? And it says regulation, I'm not sure what it is, but essentially they want to have a single owner and a deputy for every employee, which also applies to key result owners. They feel it's better than having 2, because there's a very clear responsibility, right? And no one feels that the other person is going to take care of the care, right? So what do you think about that, Ben?
Yeah, I think that for some cases that works really well. What I would say is it depends on your culture. So if you're going to focus on accountability, and here's what I'm trying to say, you should do what's right for you. And I think with OKRs, it's amazing because you have a culture of your company. And what works for your culture, like I've seen some organizations say, well, we use OKRs to help us with focus. But yet they have like 6 objectives at the company level. And I'm like, wow, I feel super unfocused when you tell me that you have 6 objectives. So you have to make sure that whatever your culture is, so if you have a culture of accountability, then it probably makes sense to have just one name next to your key result and say, well, this is the accountable person that's going to be putting their name on that key result. But I want you to make that be a decision, because other teams will say, hey, we really need to prioritize alignment because everybody's working in silos. And the danger is if you put one name on every key result, everybody kind of thinks like, oh, that key result is just a marketing key result. I don't need to worry about it because that's the marketing person. So you have to be careful on making, like, that's why I say anybody that says you should only always have one key result, or you should only always have two key results, two names on a key result, I think they're making a mistake. So as long as you have a thoughtful decision that's just have the one name and that's working for you, I say go for it.
Great, thanks. So Elias is asking probably $1 million question. How do you ensure that you have a performance culture, probably means high performing culture, where you can have buy-in across the board? Yeah.
Well, how do you ensure that you have a high performance culture where you have buy-in, right? The bottom line there is it comes down to, with OKRs, if you're going to do OKRs, because I think you can still have a high performance culture even without OKRs. I don't know if those are totally required, but if you're going to have OKRs, you have to make sure that it drives a high performance culture. I mean, I think most people want that. And so the way to do this is really to involve people in the OKR development process. One of the best ways to do it is for the team lead to come in with objectives, because leadership needs to provide the context and the strategy for the team. The team shouldn't have to develop that. I mean, that's what leadership's there for. So the leadership needs to say, hey, here's the objective. We're going to win Belgium or whatever. I remember I had one client, they were so excited. We're going to win Belgium because they were in the fashion industry and like Belgium was really where it's at. If you can win the Benelux market or whatever it was called, if you can get that market penetrated and be the number one player there, boom, you're going to hit all the other markets. So that was their objective. But then the question was, what are the key results, right? How do we know we're winning Belgium? And so the leader then said that was the objective. They all got excited, but then the leader said, I'm going to walk out, come back in 1 hour, and you're going to tell me what your ideas are. See, this is that more bottom-up ideation. And so then they're able to present that to the leader, and the leader's like, okay, well, that's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, guys, I think that this is the plan. Like, and so then they're like, okay, wait, this is our plan, right? It's not just this is the leader's plan. So the performance culture and the buy-in, which are sort of kind of hand in hand, they really come into play by getting the participatory goal setting. I mean, this is what all the research says. But as a leader, if you listen carefully, what that means is you might need to leave the room. And the reason is, I've seen this happen too. The leader sets the stage and then says, now I'm not going to answer what I think the key results are, but I'm going to facilitate. So the leader's up there on the whiteboard listening to all the people, but all the people are trying to say the thing that the leader wants to hear. And so they're filtering their real thinking. Or even worse, the leader says, oh, okay, so you say, I think we should improve customer retention from X to Y. So you're saying, oh, okay. So what you're really saying is customer retention is important in the Benelux market from, wait, they never said Benelux market, but the facilitator who's the leader says that. So then they say, so did I get that right? And then you're going to say, yeah, because you want to agree with the leader, right? You don't want to challenge the leader, say, no, you're wrong. So that's where sometimes a really good leader actually just leaves the room.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I guess we're going to be leaving the room here.
Yeah. And that's such a great question. Elias, thanks. Ben, probably we should do a webinar just on this topic. How do you create a good high performing culture? Right. But, with that, probably one, and Ben, thank you so much for, such an insightful series. And we have, probably this has been one of our most engaging series. And, sorry, we couldn't answer all the questions, but, we would really like to thank Ben and of course, all of you here at the audience for making this as a great series. And we are really ending it with an amazing session. There are a lot more questions we have not answered. So folks, if you could probably drop an email, anonymous, we don't know who it is, but, absolutely, if you could just drop us the questions, we will try to answer that, right? So
yeah, thank you, because Profit does a really good job of writing a blog post afterwards where we'll try to answer the questions and we'll look at that. Yeah, thanks everybody, and have a great rest of April, and good luck with checking in and maintaining momentum throughout that cycle.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Ciao.